This story is titled, My Wife Humiliated Me in Front of Everyone at the Party. But when she turned back to look at me, I had already disappeared while the crowd kept laughing. Hey Reddit, my name is Dylan, and I'm 29 years old. I live in Miami with my wife Victoria, and we've been together for 8 years total. I work as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized company, and up until recently, everything in our life seemed completely normal. But tonight, something felt different in a way that I couldn't ignore. She was late again, but not in the casual, got caught in traffic way that happens to everyone. I mean, she was hours late, and there was something deliberate about it that made my stomach turn. The pasta I had prepared on the stove had gone completely cold, sitting there like a sad reminder of the dinner we were supposed to share together. Rex, our dog, had been barking at every single car door slam outside, his tail wagging frantically like he expected each sound to be her finally coming home. It never was. Each false alarm seemed to deflate him a little more, and watching him wait for her was almost harder than waiting myself. I wasn't pacing around the house anymore. I wasn't even angry, which surprised me. The anger had already come and passed through me like a summer thunderstorm. Intense, overwhelming, and then gone, leaving behind something quieter but more permanent. What was left felt different, like something was hardening inside my chest, crystallizing into a truth I wasn't ready to face. I was sitting on the couch with one hand still holding the beer I'd opened 3 hours earlier, the condensation long since dried up. The other hand was absently scrolling through the calendar app on my phone, and that's when I saw it. Her calendar was shared with mine. She never turned it off. She must have forgotten about that setting, or maybe she just never cared enough to think about it. The meeting title read, Client Check-in 7 p.m. Riverside, and beneath it, in smaller text that felt like a punch to the gut, recurring every Tuesday. The word recurring sat there on the screen, mocking me. I put the phone down slowly, not because I was shocked by what I'd discovered, but because I wasn't shocked at all. Somewhere deep down, I think I'd already known. She'd been different for months now, and not in the way that life just naturally takes its toll on a marriage. We'd been through those rough patches before, stress from work, money problems, that dry stretch where we barely touched each other. But we'd always come back from all of it stronger. We were a team, or at least I thought we were, but this was different. It was her eyes, man. Her eyes used to light up when she saw me, even on the worst days. That look was completely gone now, replaced by something I can only describe as cold calculation. She started wearing perfume again, but not for me. She started working late constantly, kept her phone flipped face down on every surface, and took calls in the garage where I couldn't hear the conversations. And still, I made excuses for all of it. That's what love does to you. It makes you an accomplice to your own betrayal. You become so invested in protecting the illusion that you'll ignore every red flag waving right in front of your face. So tonight I waited. Not because I wanted to catch her in a lie, but because I wanted the lie to finally show itself without a mask. At 10:15 p.m., she texted me, I'm on my way. No apology, no explanation for being 3 hours late, just those 4 words that felt more like a report than a message to someone who supposedly loved me. I didn't reply to her text. Instead, I stood up from the couch, walked into our bedroom, and opened the top drawer of her nightstand. That drawer she always kept locked until recently. She'd stopped caring enough to lock it again, and that carelessness was about to cost her everything. Inside was a receipt, folded neatly like it was something precious. 2 nights at the Palms Inn, dated 4 weeks ago. Her name was listed as the primary guest, and below it was another name that made my blood run cold. His name was listed as guest 2. No last name, just Blake. I sat back on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in my fingers. I don't know why seeing that name made it all feel so real. Maybe because it was so ordinary, so unremarkable. Blake. It made the whole thing feel like it had been happening in plain sight, like she wasn't even trying to hide it from me anymore. She came through the door around 10:45 p.m., her coat draped casually over one arm and her heels dangling from her other hand. Her hair was pulled up in a way that looked deliberately messy, and her makeup was smudged just enough to tell a story she would never admit out loud, but one that was written all over her face. She didn't see me at first. I was still sitting in the dark bedroom, the hotel receipt clutched in my hand like evidence in a trial that was about to begin. She walked into the house with the confidence of someone who thought she'd gotten away with something. But when she finally caught sight of me sitting there in the shadows, she froze completely. "Oh," she said, and that single word carried more weight than any explanation she could have offered. It wasn't surprise or guilt. It was the sound of someone who had forgotten I existed, like I was some misplaced memory she'd accidentally stumbled into. I didn't say anything at first. I just held up the receipt, letting it speak for itself. She didn't flinch when she saw it. Instead, she sighed deeply and rolled her eyes like I had just brought up something petty, like I'd left dishes in the sink or forgotten to take out the trash. "What are you doing, Dylan?" she asked flatly. And that was it. No panic, no guilt, no scrambling to explain herself. Just irritation, like I was the inconvenience here. Like her being caught cheating was somehow my problem for having the audacity to notice. I didn't speak right away. I just stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman standing in front of me with the person I thought I'd married 8 years ago. Victoria dropped her keys into the bowl by the door, like it was any other night. Like she hadn't just been with another man in some overpriced hotel room, like I wasn't holding the receipt with her betrayal printed on it in black ink. "What do you want me to say?" she asked finally. Her tone was clipped and impatient, like I had cornered her over something trivial. "You could start with the truth," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. It didn't even sound like mine. It was calmer than I expected, and that scared me more than if I'd been shouting. She looked at the floor, then back at me, then simply walked into the kitchen without another word. She opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and took a long drink like she hadn't just detonated our entire life together. "The truth is," she said with a scoff, "you're being dramatic." That word hit me like a slap. Dramatic. Like this was some overblown misunderstanding, like I hadn't been lied to, gaslit, and made to feel like I was the one losing touch with reality. I followed her into the kitchen, where she leaned against the counter with her arms crossed, casually sipping her water. There was no remorse, no shame, just that smug defiance, the same look she used to give when she got caught speeding and thought she could talk her way out of a ticket. "Who is he?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would hurt. "Someone who actually listens to me," she replied without hesitation, without apology, without even pretending to care how those words would land. I took a step back, not because I was afraid, but because I felt like the floor wasn't steady anymore. The kitchen tiles, the walls, even the pictures of us on the refrigerator. All of it felt foreign now, like I was standing in someone else's house. She kept going, apparently deciding that since she was caught, she might as well twist the knife. "We met at a conference. We talked. We clicked. You and I haven't clicked in years, Dylan, and you know it. I just had the guts to do something about it." "You mean cheat," I said. "You mean lie. Call it what you want." She shrugged, as if semantics could somehow soften the betrayal. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. "You're not exactly innocent either." "What the hell does that mean?" I demanded. "You stopped trying," she snapped, her composure finally cracking. "You stopped seeing me. You work late. You forget things, birthdays, anniversaries. You come home and sit in front of the TV with your beer and your dog, like that's enough. Like I'm supposed to fill in all the rest." I actually laughed at that, a bitter, low sound that surprised us both. "So you slept with someone because I forgot to buy flowers?" She rolled her eyes again. "Don't twist this." "No, Victoria," I said, feeling my voice crack for the first time. "I'm finally seeing it straight. You've been gone for months. You just didn't have the decency to leave." She turned her back on me then, just like that. She opened the cupboard, grabbed a wine glass, and poured herself a drink like it was part of her post-shift routine. "This conversation is going nowhere," she muttered. "You're unbelievable," I whispered, but she didn't even flinch. I left the kitchen and walked into the hallway, stopping in front of the photo hanging above the thermostat. It was us on the California coast 2 summers ago, her hair windblown, my arm around her shoulders, both of us genuinely smiling. We looked happy in that picture. Maybe we were. Or maybe she was just waiting for someone like Blake to come along and remind her how easy it was to lie. Neither of us slept that night. She stayed in the guest room, and I stayed on the couch with Rex curled up beside me. She didn't say goodnight, and neither did I. The morning hit different than I expected. It wasn't the light streaming through the windows or the unusual silence that woke me up. It was Rex. He was pawing at the couch cushion near my head, giving that low, confused whine he makes when something feels off in his world. I opened my eyes and saw him staring toward the hallway, his ears perked up and his tail completely still. The guest room door was already open, which meant she was up before me. The smell of coffee was drifting through the air, but it wasn't our usual blend. Victoria had bought this vanilla-flavored garbage last week that made the entire kitchen smell like a Bath and Body Works store. I absolutely hated it, and she knew I hated it, but she'd brewed it anyway this morning. It felt like a dare, like she was testing how much more of her disrespect I was willing to swallow. I got up slowly, feeling every muscle in my body protesting. My head was pounding from the lack of sleep, and my mouth tasted like rust and regret. When I stepped into the kitchen, I saw her sitting at the table with her laptop open, already dressed for work. Her hair was tied back neatly, she had her silver earrings on, and she looked completely put together, like absolutely nothing had happened the night before. "Morning," she said without even looking up from her screen. That was it. No follow-up conversation, no acknowledgement of the bomb that had gone off in our marriage just hours earlier. No guilt, no shame, no attempt to address what we'd discussed. Just morning, like I was a stranger she was sharing a rental house with. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked past her to the cabinet, grabbed a mug, and poured myself some of that burnt coffee. I stood there drinking it, watching her type something into her laptop, click a few buttons, and sip her drink with the calm demeanor of someone who had absolutely nothing weighing on her conscience. After a long moment, I finally asked, "So what now?" She looked up at me then, her eyes scanning my face like I was a document she was editing, calculating and cold. "I'm staying at my sister's for a few days," she said matter-of-factly. "Is Blake going to be there too?" I shot back, the name slipping from my mouth like venom I'd been holding there all night. She blinked once, slowly. "Don't be childish." "No, you don't get to decide how I process your betrayal," I said, feeling something sharp and final settling in my chest. She sighed again. That same damn sigh she used to reserve for when I forgot to pick up paper towels from the store or didn't sort the recycling correctly. Not for this. Not for what she had done to us. "You need space," she said simply. "So do I." I laughed under my breath, a sound with no humor in it whatsoever. "You've had plenty of space, Victoria. You had space every Tuesday night. You had space in his bed." She stood up slowly, closing her laptop with deliberate precision and picking up her purse like she was late for an important meeting. "I'm not doing this with you. I'm not going to sit here and let you drag this into a screaming match." "I'm not screaming," I pointed out. "Not yet," she said, walking toward the door with that infuriating confidence she always carried when she thought she was winning an argument. Right before she stepped outside, she paused and turned to look at me one last time. She gave me this cold little smirk that I'd never seen before, and it chilled me to the bone. "For what it's worth," she said, "he never made me feel invisible." She closed the door behind her before I could say a word, and the click of it echoed in my skull like a gunshot. I didn't move for a long time after that. I didn't drink the coffee, didn't clear the table, didn't do anything except stand there in the heavy air filled with everything she hadn't said and everything I wished I could take back. Later that morning, I called my boss and told him I needed a few days off. He didn't ask why, just told me to take care of myself. Rex sat by the front door for hours, lifting his head hopefully every time headlights flickered across the window. He was still waiting for her to come home, not understanding that she wasn't coming back. Not like before, not for a while, and maybe not ever. She didn't come back that night, or the one after that. But what happened on the third night? I wasn't ready for that at all, Dot. On the third night, the house felt completely hollow. I hadn't bothered turning on the TV, didn't even attempt to make dinner for myself. Rex was still posted near the front door like a faithful sentinel, lifting his head hopefully every time headlights flickered across the window from passing cars. He didn't understand that she wasn't coming back. Not like before, not for a while, and maybe not ever. At exactly 10:37 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was short and direct. "You deserve to know the whole truth." That was it. Nothing else. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over it while my pulse started ticking at my temples. I didn't respond immediately, but a minute later, another message came through that made my blood run cold. She told me you were separated, that you cheated first, that you didn't care about her anymore. I sat down slowly, the weight of those words hitting me like a physical blow. I didn't know this number, didn't recognize it from anywhere, but I knew exactly who was sending these texts. Blake. He didn't say his name, but who else would be reaching out to me with that kind of boldness, that kind of calculated attempt to shift the guilt? I finally replied, "You're sleeping with a married woman. Don't talk to me like you're a victim." His response came back fast, almost desperate. "I didn't know, I swear. She lied about everything. I just found out 2 days ago you were still together." 2 days ago. That would have been the night she came home and I confronted her with the hotel receipt, The night she acted like I was the burden dragging everything down. The inconvenience ruining her perfectly orchestrated double life. I ended it when I found out, he continued. She showed up at my apartment yesterday and begged me not to tell you. Said you'd turn it into a drama. Begged him not to tell me. There it was. The final twist of the knife that I hadn't been expecting. Not only had she been cheating on me for months, but she had systematically lied to both of us. Played us both like pieces on some twisted game board where she never intended to lose. She had manipulated him just as thoroughly as she had manipulated me. I asked him one last question, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. How long? There was a hesitation in his response. I could tell by the longer pause before his phone buzzed again. When the reply finally came through, it hit me harder than I thought it would. Almost 7 months. 7 months. That meant this affair had started long before her new job, before the perfume, before the cold shoulder and the phone calls in the garage. She hadn't gradually drifted away from our marriage. She had planned this. She had made a calculated decision to live a double life while coming home to me every night and pretending everything was normal. The texts stopped after that exchange. I think he knew there was nothing left to say. Nothing that could undo the damage or make any of this easier to process. I sat there in the silence for over an hour, Rex eventually curling up at my feet like he was trying to offer whatever comfort he could. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was Victoria calling. Not a text, but an actual call. I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear her voice right now, not when I had her lies sitting in my palm like a confession she hadn't had the decency to make herself. I forwarded all of Blake's texts to her number and hit send. 15 minutes passed in complete silence, then she called again. Then came a text. Can we talk, please? No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just that simple request, as if we were going to have a casual conversation about weekend plans. I stared at her message for a while, then put the phone face down on the coffee table. I walked outside and sat on the porch, breathing in the night air and trying to process everything that had just been revealed. It was the first time since this nightmare began that I felt something close to clarity. She didn't break me that night, but she had definitely and completely stopped being my wife. Whatever we had built together over 8 years, whatever love and trust and partnership we had shared, it was already gone. I just hadn't realized it until now. I didn't answer her text that night, and I didn't respond the next morning either. I needed her to sit in the silence for once, to feel what it was like when I stopped catching every lie she threw into the air like confetti. For months, I had been scrambling to make sense of her behavior, making excuses for her distance, trying to bridge gaps that she was actively widening. Now, it was her turn to wonder what I was thinking. The following afternoon, I was in the garage trying to busy myself with meaningless tasks. I was rearranging my toolbox for the 3rd time, wiping down the hood of my old Honda even though it didn't need it. Anything to keep my hands moving, while my thoughts clawed at me like trapped animals. That's when I heard the familiar sound of her car pulling into the driveway. I didn't move from where I was standing. The engine shut off with its usual mechanical sigh, followed by the slam of her car door and the sound of footsteps on gravel. They were slow, deliberate steps, the kind someone takes when they know they're walking into something bigger than they can talk their way out of. The garage door creaked open behind me. Dylan, her voice was small and too careful, like she was approaching a wounded animal that might bolt or attack. I didn't answer. I kept my eyes focused on the wrench I was polishing, even though it didn't need the attention. She stepped into the garage wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, dressed down like it was just a casual Saturday visit. Like we hadn't just burned our entire marriage to ash and scattered it across 8 years of shared history. I saw the texts, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I kept my eyes on that wrench, turning it over in my hands. I figured you would. I didn't mean for you to find out that way, she continued, as if the method of discovery was somehow the real problem here. You didn't mean for me to find out at all, Victoria, I said, finally looking up at her. Let's not pretend this is about poor timing. She sighed and folded her arms across her chest, settling into what I recognized as her defensive posture. I just wanted to explain if you'd let me. You lied to both of us, I said, standing up now. I wasn't raising my voice, just saying it clearly so there could be no misunderstanding. You told him we were separated. You told him that I cheated. You told him that I didn't care about you. Do you even hear yourself when you speak? I panicked, she said, as if that explained away 7 months of calculated deception. You have no idea what it's like, feeling ignored every single day. Stop, I said, stepping closer. Rex barked once from inside the house, sensing the tension building between us. You don't get to rewrite this story. You didn't cheat because I forgot your birthday. You didn't cheat because we had a dry spell in our marriage. You cheated because you wanted to, because it was easy, because you thought you could get away with it. She was quiet now, but I wasn't finished. The words had been building up inside me for days, and they needed to come out. You gaslit me for months, I continued, my voice shaking just enough to reveal the anger I'd been holding back. You looked me in the eye, told me you were working late, and then went and laid in someone else's bed, in someone else's arms. Then you came home and acted like I was the problem, like I didn't try hard enough, like our marriage failing was somehow my fault. I was scared, she said quietly. I didn't know how to leave. You could have talked to me, I replied. You could have ended it honestly. Instead, you chose to live a double life and feed me scraps of whatever was left of your attention and affection. I didn't mean to fall for him, she whispered, and those words hit like a physical blow to my chest. She saw the impact her words had and turned away for just a second, maybe to give me a moment to breathe, or maybe because she couldn't face what she'd just admitted. I want a divorce, I said finally, the words coming out steady and clear. She blinked and took a step back, like I'd struck her. Dylan, wait! There's no waiting, I cut her off. You made your choice 7 months ago. You just didn't have the guts to live with the consequences. Don't throw away 8 years, she pleaded. No, I said firmly. You did that. You threw it away when you walked into that hotel every Tuesday night, when you lied to his face and mine, when you decided that I wasn't even worth the truth. The silence that followed felt heavy and final. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She didn't make any last desperate attempts to change my mind. She just stood there, and I could see that the mask was finally gone. She knew it was over. I'll pack my things, she said softly. I nodded. Do it today. She walked back to her car without another word. I didn't follow her, didn't watch her drive away. I just stood there in the garage, feeling like someone who had watched a storm move out across the horizon, knowing it had left damage in its wake, but also knowing that the worst had finally passed. She packed in complete silence. 3 suitcases, a duffel bag, and that stupid velvet jewelry roll I had bought her during our trip to Las Vegas. Something she never used until now, when she needed to transport the remnants of her life away from mine. She didn't cry during the process, she didn't argue or try to negotiate, and she didn't make any grand speeches about what we were losing. She moved through the house like a tenant collecting her belongings after a short lease, not like a wife leaving behind 8 years of shared memories and dreams. I watched from the living room, positioned where I could see her, but didn't have to interact. I didn't help her carry anything, didn't offer to make the process easier, and I sure as hell didn't speak. This was her mess to clean up, her choice to live with, her consequence to face. She paused only once during the entire process, in the hallway with her hand resting on the doorframe to our bedroom. Maybe it was for dramatic effect, or maybe it was genuine hesitation as some flicker of our history played behind her eyes. I didn't care anymore. Whatever emotions or memories were surfacing for her in that moment were hers to keep now. I was done being the curator of her feelings. She walked into the bedroom one final time, grabbed her phone charger, her perfume, and that book she'd never finished reading. Then she walked back out like she was leaving a hotel room after a brief stay. Rex watched her the entire time, his tail wagging in confusion because he didn't understand why she was taking so much stuff with her. When she bent down once to scratch behind his ear, he actually flinched away from her touch. Even he could sense that something fundamental had changed. Good dog, she said softly, but there was no emotion in it. When she was finally done, she stood near the front door with her suitcases lined up neatly beside her like soldiers ready for deployment. The house already felt different, lighter in some ways, emptier in others. I'll call about the papers, she said without looking directly at me. Use your lawyer, I replied without looking up from the magazine I was pretending to read. I'm done having conversations with you. She didn't respond to that. The door clicked shut behind her with a sound that felt like punctuation, the end of a very long, very painful sentence. And then it was just me and Rex in a house that suddenly had too many empty hangers and a silence that settled in like fog. That night, I slept in our bed alone for the first time in 8 years. Rex curled up next to me like he used to do when he was a puppy, like he remembered what it was like when things made sense, and the people he loved didn't disappear without explanation. But even in the stillness of that first night without her, I knew it wasn't over. Not completely. There was still something lurking beneath the surface, something I couldn't quite put my finger on but could feel in my bones. The next morning, I woke up to a voicemail from an unknown number. It wasn't Blake this time. It was a woman I'd never heard of. "Hi, you don't know me, but my name is Jessica. I was Blake's girlfriend, or I guess ex-girlfriend now. I found your number through his phone, and I think we need to talk." I sat up slowly in bed, feeling the weight shift once again. Victoria wasn't just cheating on me. She was part of a whole web of deception that was bigger than I'd realized. And Jessica, whoever she was about to burn whatever was left of Victoria's carefully constructed lies to the ground. Jessica called at exactly 11:24 a.m. I let it ring once before answering, not knowing what to expect from this conversation. Maybe someone angry and loud, ready to scream accusations at me. Maybe someone looking to blame me for her boyfriend's infidelity. But when I picked up, her voice was calm and steady, the voice of someone who'd had enough time to turn their heartbreak into something sharper and more focused. "Thanks for picking up," she said. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear what I have to say." "I do," I replied. "Go ahead." She didn't rush into it or stumble over her words. Jessica told me that she and Blake had been together for 3 years. They'd met through work, he sold medical equipment to hospitals, and she managed client relations for the same company. It had been a stable relationship, she explained, not fireworks and passion, but solid and dependable. She thought they were heading towards something permanent, maybe marriage, until everything fell apart 3 weeks ago. "I found a hotel receipt in his glove box," she said. "The Palms Inn. When I asked him about it, he gave me this stupid half smile and said it was just a client thing, nothing to worry about. But the name on the bill was Victoria, her name, not his." My stomach turned as she continued. "I started digging after that. I saw her name popping up in his text messages, found pictures on his phone. There was one of them together at a lake somewhere. She was wearing a red coat, looking happy and relaxed." I sat up straighter in my chair. "What lake?" "Silver Lake, about an hour from here." That broke something open inside me. Silver Lake was our place, Victoria's and mine. We used to drive there every fall when the leaves changed colors. She always said it was her escape zone, her place to think and breathe and get away from everything. Apparently, she had just changed who she escaped with. "She told Blake that you were her ex-husband," Jessica continued matter-of-factly. "Said you were unstable, that you had cheated on her first. I don't know how much of it he believed, but I think he wanted to believe the best of her, you know. It's easier that way." "What made him finally see the truth?" I asked. "I showed him proof," she said simply. "Last Tuesday, I followed her. I saw her get out of your car in his apartment complex parking lot. He hadn't even noticed that detail, that she was coming from your house, not from work or wherever she claimed to be living. So Victoria hadn't just lied to me about where she was going. She'd been lying to Blake about where she was coming from. She had been telling him we were divorced while coming home to me every night, cooking dinner, and pretending to be a devoted wife. The level of deception was staggering." "She's a good liar," I said, more to myself than to Jessica. "She is," Jessica agreed, "but she's not careful. I think she liked being in control too much, thought we were both too stupid or too scared to talk to each other. I guess she was wrong about that." Before we hung up, Jessica said one more thing that stuck with me long after the conversation ended. "She's not done yet," she warned me. "She's the type who needs to win every situation, who can't stand losing control of the narrative. Watch your back." After we ended the call, I sat there for a long time, not in disbelief, but in a kind of grim realization. Victoria's betrayal wasn't a mistake born out of loneliness or desperation. It wasn't a moment of weakness or some desperate search for happiness. It was a calculated choice, a series of deliberate decisions built on lies, maintained through manipulation, and wrapped in this narcissistic idea that she could always stay one step ahead of everyone else. She had wanted to be untouchable, invincible, the puppet master pulling strings while the rest of us danced to her tune. But now she was exposed, and all her carefully constructed lies were crumbling around her. It didn't take long for Jessica's prediction to prove accurate. Just 3 days after our phone conversation, Victoria came back to the house. She didn't knock when she came back. She used her key, the one she still hadn't bothered to return, and let herself into the house like nothing fundamental had changed between us. Rex started barking before the door even finished creaking open, his whole body going stiff with tension. I came down the stairs to find her standing in our living room like it was still hers, her eyes methodically scanning the room like she was checking inventory. "You talked to him," she said without any preamble or greeting. "Which one?" I asked, crossing my arms and staying at the bottom of the stairs. She blinked, and I caught a brief crack in her armor. "Blake, I know he told you things. And Jessica told me things too, I said, watching her carefully. Turns out you were playing both of us pretty thoroughly. Impressive, really. She didn't deny it, didn't even try to look surprised that I knew about Jessica. She didn't flinch or scramble for an explanation. Dylan, she started, stepping closer with that calculated charm she used when she wanted something. You're angry, I get it. No, I cut her off immediately. You don't get anything. You don't understand anything about what I'm feeling. You've been talking to everyone but me, she said, her voice taking on a wounded tone. Because they're the only ones telling the truth, I replied. And then, because her ego couldn't handle the fact that her carefully constructed story was falling apart, she did exactly what Jessica had warned me about. She pivoted, switching tactics like a politician caught in a scandal. You know, she said slowly, her voice dropping to something softer and more dangerous. I could tell people a very different version of this story. I narrowed my eyes. What are you talking about? Her expression shifted completely. She looked down at the floor, then back at me with this sudden sadness painted across her face like she was gearing up for an Academy Award performance. What if I said you were controlling? She whispered, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. That you were cold, distant, maybe even a little unhinged when you got angry? The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears as the implications of what she was suggesting sank in. I wouldn't do that, she added quickly, like she was doing me some kind of favor. I'm just saying you should think about how this all looks from the outside. Perception matters, Dylan. There it was, the veiled threat wrapped in fake concern. Not a screaming match or a breakdown, but a knife presented in a silk wrapper. She was threatening to destroy my reputation, to paint me as an abusive husband if I didn't play nice during the divorce proceedings. Are you threatening me? I asked, my voice deadly calm. She smiled then, soft and cruel at the same time. I think you should be careful. Divorce proceedings can get really messy when emotions run high, and people say things that might not be entirely accurate, but sound believable enough. It was surreal, standing in that spot where we used to open Christmas gifts together, where we once danced drunkenly in our socks on the hardwood floors, and watching her threaten to destroy me if I didn't cooperate with her version of events. You're not going to win this, I told her, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. I already did, she said with that same cold smile. 7 months ago. She turned and walked toward the door like a queen who knew the fire was already lit and spreading. She didn't slam it behind her, didn't make any dramatic gestures. She just walked out with that infuriating confidence, leaving me standing in the silence that followed. My jaw was locked so tight it ached. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity anymore. I was dealing with a woman who would burn everything down around us just to make sure she didn't lose. Victoria wasn't going to go quietly into the night. She was going to make this divorce as ugly and painful as possible, and she was going to try to take me down with her. Taking my life back didn't start with some grand gesture or dramatic confrontation. It started with something as simple as changing the locks that same night. I drove to the hardware store, bought a new deadbolt, and installed it by hand in my garage. The whole process took me 3 hours, not because it was particularly difficult, but because I made sure every single turn of the screwdriver was deliberate and final. Victoria wasn't walking into this house again. Not with a key, not with a smirk, not with one more thinly veiled threat wrapped in perfume-scented lies. The next morning, I made a call to a divorce attorney. Her name was Lauren, and she came highly recommended by a colleague at work. When I sat in her office and told her everything, the affair, the lies, the manipulation, the threats, she didn't flinch or seem surprised. She just asked me to bring evidence, both figurative and literal. I brought both. The receipts from the Palms Inn, the text messages from Blake, the voicemails from Jessica, and a printed list of every Tuesday night Victoria claimed to have work meetings that coincided perfectly with billing statements from the hotel. I had documented everything with the thoroughness of someone who knew they were going to war. Lauren looked me straight in the eye after reviewing everything and said, "We're going to do this clean and by the book. She's not going to like it, but that's not our problem." I smiled for the first time in weeks. She doesn't like a lot of things that aren't about her. Victoria didn't respond well when she received the official divorce filing. She texted me once, "So you're really doing this after everything we've been through?" No apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. Still no ownership of her actions. Just that typical Victoria victimhood, as if I was the one who had torched our marriage instead of the one crawling out of the wreckage she'd left behind. I didn't answer her text, I was done engaging with her manipulations. I spent the next few weeks slowly untangling myself from every trace of her presence in my life. I took down every photograph of us together, boxed up all the framed memories, the matching coffee mugs, the throw blanket we'd picked out together for the couch. All of it went into the attic, not because I wanted to keep it as some shrine to our failed marriage, but because I needed the emotional space first, both physically and mentally. I reclaimed every room in the house, every corner that had been contaminated by her lies. I started cooking real meals for myself again, instead of surviving on frozen garbage. I took Rex on longer walks through the neighborhood, sat outside with a beer in the evenings, and watched the sunset alone. But I wasn't lonely. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. The more distance I put between us, the more clearly I could see our relationship for what it really was. Victoria didn't love me. She loved being adored. She loved being chased. She loved the high of being needed and wanted. And the moment she had that secure foundation, she'd pull away because she wasn't capable of stillness, of loyalty, of building something real and lasting. She didn't just cheat on me. She had tried to rewrite our entire history so that when she finally walked away, she'd be the one people felt sorry for. She wanted to be seen as the victim of a cold, neglectful husband rather than the architect of her own betrayal. But I wasn't giving her that narrative. I wasn't playing her game anymore, wasn't going to let her control how this story ended. The morning the divorce paperwork was finally processed and finalized by the court, I didn't feel victorious or celebratory. I felt something much better than that. I felt ready. Ready to stop surviving her damage and start actually living again. Victoria showed up on the very last day, exactly 3 hours after I received the confirmation email from Lauren that read, "Your divorce has been processed and finalized by the court. You are now legally separated from Victoria Lee Carter." I sat there reading those words twice, letting them sink in completely. I didn't feel joy or relief in that moment. I didn't cry or celebrate. Instead, I felt something much more profound. A deep stillness that had evaded me for months. It was the kind of peace that comes after a storm finally runs out of sky to rage against. Then there was a knock at the door. Not the sound of a key turning in a lock, but an actual knock, respectful, almost hesitant. I opened it slowly to find her standing on my porch in jeans and a pale sweater, holding her phone in one hand and a manila file folder in the other, like she still had something important to offer me. Her face was softer than I'd seen it in months, not angry or smug, just unreadable in a way that made me cautious. "I saw that the paperwork went through," she said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, it did." She looked past me into the house, taking in the changes I'd made since she left. "It looks really empty now." "No," I corrected her. "It's just clean." She didn't smile at that, didn't laugh or roll her eyes like she might have in the past. She just looked at me like she didn't quite recognize what I'd become. Or maybe she did recognize it and realized she could no longer manipulate this version of me. "I didn't come here to fight," she said finally. "Then don't," I replied simply. There was a long silence between us, filled with 8 years of history and months of lies. Then she said something I never expected to hear from her. "I messed up." I didn't move, didn't give her any indication of how those words landed. "I know it's too late and I'm not asking for anything," she continued. "I just needed you to hear me say it." I studied her face for a long time, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. She looked tired, not from crying or guilt, but from carrying a version of herself that she couldn't justify anymore. The invincible woman, the untouchable master manipulator, was gone. What stood in front of me was just someone who had finally run out of lies to tell. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. And I meant it. "But I don't trust you and I don't miss you. That's what you came to hear, right?" She blinked, clearly caught off guard by my honesty. Victoria had always assumed she maintained a piece of everyone's heart, tucked away for emergencies when she needed validation or control. But mine was completely gone. She had no power over me anymore. "I hope you find whatever it is you're still looking for," I added, not with malice but with genuine indifference. She nodded slowly, swallowed hard, and took a step back from the door. For the first time since the day we'd met 8 years ago, Victoria had absolutely nothing left to say. No clever comeback, no manipulation, no attempt to regain control of the situation. She turned and walked away without another word. No final dramatic statement or attempt to hurt me one last time. Just the sound of her heels clicking on the concrete, getting quieter with each step until they disappeared entirely. I closed the door behind her slowly, deliberately, and finally. That night, I built a fire in the backyard pit while Rex curled up beside me on the grass. I took the manila file folder she'd left behind, full of old notes, photographs, and greeting cards from our relationship, and fed it into the flames piece by piece. I watched each memory curl and vanish into smoke, not with sadness, but with a sense of completion. Closure doesn't always come with peace, I realized. Sometimes it comes with weight, with a quiet knowing that a chapter of your life has truly ended. But it came nonetheless, and I accepted it gratefully. And I'll tell you this, if you're reading this story and your gut is screaming at you about someone in your life, listen to it. Don't wait for irrefutable proof. Don't chase their lies trying to make sense of them. Don't spend years trying to fix what they're actively breaking behind your back. You'll lose precious time and pieces of yourself in the process. Walk away. Let them drown in the mess they created. You get to breathe again, and I can tell you from experience that breathing after someone like Victoria has never felt so good.